Welcome to the Interaxis channel and Interaxis.io. We're going to start talking about another subject which is really important in the cryptocurrency and in the decentralized finance and in the blockchain world, and that is one of identity. First, I need to remind you to go subscribe to the channel here. We send out these videos, or we create these videos and this content pretty often, and we want you to make sure that you have the most accurate and the most up-to-date videos that we have. We really like doing this, and we like to make sure that our subscribers get these as soon as they come out. So please go ahead and subscribe and tell us what you think in the comments. But back to identity. So identity is really important, and it's something that a lot of us in the developed world actually kind of take for granted. Okay, so we have so much that is tied to, from a financial perspective and from a government perspective, our identity. So it starts potentially here in the United States with the Social Security number, right? And they call it different things in different countries, but you have a Social Security number, something you get pretty much as soon as you are born. You are born and now you get a Social Security number. And that is going to help drive so many of the things in your life, including your things like your credit, your financial abilities, school, taxes, everything like that is going to be driven by this number that you get when you're born. So eventually, based on the Social Security number, you will go through school and you'll be registered and you'll be tracked, kind of. You will be able to register for public school, private school, whatever it is, based on your Social Security number. You're going to have to give that because it uniquely identifies you. There's only one for every person. It's very unique, and that's why it's so important, because we needed one unique number to be able to identify people. It's such an important number that you understand when people get their Social Security numbers stolen, why they're available on gray markets, why it's so important that you keep it. So you'll use your Social Security number when you get a job, right? And that will link to paying your taxes. This is kind of a big one because the government here uses your Social Security number to make sure that you've paid your taxes. And later on in life, maybe when you get to retirement, you start collecting Social Security, part of the retirement plan. It's going to be tied to your number, tied to your taxes, tied to the jobs you've had, the tax returns you filed, and that's how they're going to be able to pay you your Social Security. So it's somewhat tied to your job. It's also tied to your credit. So this is your ability to borrow money, whether the borrowing of money is from banks, credit cards, for a car, for a home, from private companies, whatever it might be. Your credit is generally tied to your Social Security number, which is part of your identity. This is a really big deal now, because now if I'm borrowing money, here this shows that I officially made the money because I paid the taxes on it. This shows that I can borrow it. It's tied to my potentially my bank account, which is something we've talked about a lot, the unbanked and the banked. So my bank account is tied to my Social Security number. And this is part of what we call the KYC, AML, in the financial services terms, know your customer, anti-money laundering. This is how the banks and the overall government financial system is able to track your money through the system and make sure you're not laundering money, make sure it's not terrorist money, make sure that what you're doing is legal, make sure that if you have money and you're putting it in a bank or some sort of investment, that you've actually paid your taxes on that money. Right? So if the IRS comes after you because you haven't paid your taxes, you haven't paid enough taxes or whatever, they can go look at this and go, oh, well, you have a brokerage account with $100,000 in it, you owe us 50, we can go take that. And we know about that because it's all tied through the Social Security number, right? Because this is tied to the government. And now it's tied to the banks, and now it's tied to the credit bureaus, and now it's tied to everyone you've had a job from, everyone you went to school with. Okay, so this one number is essentially creating your identity. Now also you have your Social Security number that drives your ability to travel. Okay, because you need it to get your passport, which then gives you a passport number. Right? And it drives your ability to, we'll say, drive, because your somewhat your driver's license. Your ability to drive is based on your social security number. Your ability to, this is very important coming up, your ability to vote based on your social security number, right? That's how we know that you haven't voted twice. Okay, is the fact that every social security number essentially gets a vote. Everyone has a unique social security number. So your identity is so important, it's tied to, in the US, this number. Now, in other countries, it's called different things, but in the developed world, it's essentially the ability to say, once you're born in this country, we're going to give you a number, and that number is essentially going to permeate through not only the financial system, but your ability to travel, your ability to vote, your ability to drive, your ability to go to school, so many parts of your life. Now, your identity is also going to, it means that all these organizations, the people from which you've held jobs, you've paid your taxes, the schools you've gone to, the travel you've done, the credit, the bank, everything else is holding bits of data. Okay, they all have data on you based on this number. There's also healthcare, your health, your medical care, everything like that. Your insurance is based on your social security number. So these health companies, they have data based on your health. They're holding some of the information about your health, your medical procedures, the checkups you've had, the medicine you've taken, everything is based on your social security number. So they're holding this data, and you have to ask permission to use it. You have to ask permission to get it, and you probably have to pay them. Same thing here with the bank information. Same thing here with the travel. The credit bureaus, they get to decide kind of how they score your credit and what happens with it. So if the bank goes to the credit bureaus and says, we need to check Adam's credit to make sure that he can actually borrow money, they do it somewhat based on a social security number. So my identity is tied to so much of this in the financial world, in travel, in health, in school, in my job, in my future retirement. Everything else is tied to this social security number, which essentially identifies my identity. Okay. Now, again, in most developed countries, it's something like this. Now, if I'm a resident of the US, but not necessarily a citizen, I get a different type of number, right? But that same number is going to, again, permeate through all of this. And all of these data silos are going to hold on to my data, hold on to my information, and release it based on the entity that's asking for it, and whether or not they know my social security number, and whether or not I've signed something saying you may release the data. But until then, they're going to hold it in their little silos. Now you can see where this becomes a problem if you're potentially in a country in the developing world that might not have the infrastructure to know when every single baby is born, and might not have the infrastructure to be able to track all that and give every person that's born, every baby that's born, an identifying number. And once they have that number, now they can participate, now they can travel, now they can participate in the financial system. This is a huge part of why there are so many unbanked in the rest of the world, because if you don't have some sort of identifier, some sort of unique identifier, how can we allow you to participate in the financial ecosystem, because we don't necessarily know anything about you? On top of that, we can't punish you if something goes wrong, because we need to be able to punish you so that everyone else knows not to deal with you or to charge you more or something. Everyone needs some sort of unique identifier, unique identity. The problem is when it's the government that's in charge of giving that to you, and it's all these entities that are in charge of holding on to that data and making sure that they can trade it back and forth. Now you have what we talk about all the time in these videos, is you have fees and you have friction. And in this case, and sometimes you have censorship. You have the inability. If the government won't give you this number, you potentially have the inability to travel. You potentially have the inability to get health care, based on where you are. You might have the inability to participate in the banking system and the financial system. So that's why identity is such a big issue, and it's one that so many people in the blockchain world, in the crypto world, the DeFi world, are trying to get their arms around and trying to solve for. Because if we can create more ability for people to have some sort of unique identifier that is not necessarily government driven, if everyone can have some sort of unique token in a wallet or something that says, this is my health information, or this is my travel information, this is my banking, or I voted and I can prove to you I voted, or I can prove to you I haven't voted. But you, the government, don't get to be the store of that information. You don't get to safeguard it and charge me for it, or hold me hostage for it, or censor me for it. That is what's so important about identity. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about why identity is so important first. And in future videos, we'll talk about some of the solutions that we're seeing, some of the solutions that blockchain and crypto and DeFi are coming up with now and potentially in the future to try to solve some of these identity problems. But first, again, we had to go back and show why unique identity is so important. Remember, identity not only is a person, identity can be a company. Companies get tax ID numbers, right? Those are unique identifiers for the company, and they filter through to the social security number of the owners of the company. So we wanted to tell you a little bit about why identity is so important, and in future videos we will talk about how we're solving some of the identity issues to allow more people not only to participate in the financial economy, the world economy, because that's what we talk about so much, but how it affects health and travel and voting and everything else, and how cryptocurrency and blockchain and DeFi is solving some of those issues. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you'll subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Interaxis8. Leave us some comments so we can discuss if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, and we hope to see you in the next video.